You ever have a project that you just keep putting aside, that you can't decide what to do with? This is me with this project, which has been sitting on my shelf for more than a year in varying states of completion. So let's talk about my experience making my own version of the Dollightful bunny ball jointed doll, and the changes that I made, and what I learned from it. Hello artists, and art appreciators, and welcome back to the channel. In 2021, one of my very favorite doll YouTubers, Dollightful, posted a video of her design process for a 3D printable anthropomorphic bunny doll. She designed it and her husband 3D sculpted it. That's the design that's on the left in Blender here. Shortly thereafter, YouTuber Moonlight posted a video where she printed a design updated by 3D artist Blue Pixie Art with additional joints in a larger size. It's about 2 times the size. That one is on the right in Blender, and I'm using it as the base for my version of the bunny doll. My remix, if you will. This isn't a new idea. Other artists have also remixed these models, besides Moonlight / Blue Pixie Art. The Thingiverse website actually has a feature where you can essentially link remixes of a piece together as long as the original creator allows it, and Dollightful has listed this under Creative Commons non-commercial use, I believe. So you are free to use it as long as you're not like reselling it, essentially. Why the Dollightful bunny? Besides the fact that I just like Dollightful. Well, last year I decided I wanted to get a doll design 3D printed, but I knew that in order to learn about it, I would have to work off of other people's designs and learn how they did it. I don't actually own any ball jointed dolls except the ones I made myself by hand. I also like anthro designs a lot, so this felt like a good place to start, especially since it's free. I made some changes to the Dollightful Blue Pixie base, which I'm showing in this video, starting with some of the proportions which you saw me change at the beginning. I tried to push the extra jointed version of the doll close to the proportions of the first one. Like, I slimmed down the hips back towards the sort of straight up and down hips, increased the feet size, and raised the waist a little bit. I had to redo one of the bottom joints, the hip, in order to do that, but otherwise I was able to adjust everything pretty easily. I also made some other changes that were a little more drastic. I wanted to make the ears and the tail both posable, which is some pretty intense experimentation. The ear fluff from the original also didn't match the chest and tail fluff that was added later, so I decided to resculpt all those pieces to be more like cohesive with one another, one aesthetic. The ears that I made are specifically based on a type of rabbit called a Blanc de Hotot rabbit, or Hotot? I don't know. Hotot. But it's a white rabbit with black pattern around its eyes that looks like eyeliner, and I just think it's really cute, so. It also has kind of small ears in proportion to its whole self, so I made the ears on this a bit smaller, but otherwise sort of in the style of Dollightful's original rabbit as best I could. I did make its tail much bigger, for mostly just because I like the big tails, but also because any clothes are going to cover up most of the tail, so it's good to kind of make it extra big. The other major change I made was to the actual joints at the feet, hands, and the new tail and ears. Dollightful designed this doll to be super duper mini, and the joints were meant to essentially be like a ball that's drilled into to put a metal bar across, which would be stronger than a resin bar that's printed with it in theory. Moonlight, when she printed hers, sized it up to 2 times, but kept the metal bar in drilling. But theirs were in resin, and I was having mine printed at the library in PLA. I really didn't want to drill through it for fear of splitting or injuring myself. I was also planning on printing the doll in not just double, but triple size. So I essentially included that bar in Blender from the very beginning, because I figured that the PLA would be thick enough that the bar wouldn't break or anything. This worked fairly well for my sea pony, so I probably could have made the bars even smaller in this bunny in the end of the day. Why triple size? Well, I mentioned I want to make my own doll, namely the Takara My Little Pony ball jointed doll, which I designed and first sculpted a version of in my Takara Pony video last year. That ball jointed doll is designed to have a head roughly the same size as the Takara My Little Pony, but with a very different body. It's supposed to be like the big sister version, so one of them is like a little toddler or kid, and then one of them is more adult or teen sized. I figured out that if I printed the bunny at around triple size, her total size would be roughly proportional to the Takara pony ball jointed doll. That appealed to me because they would work well for display together. By the way, the bunny is about 11 inches tall, which is, well, minus the ears, she's 11 inches tall. She's about 12 inches tall with the ears, but that's about the size or a little bit shorter than a Barbie doll. Obviously, her proportions are very different. Her head is massive, but it's a similar height, I guess. I have a lot of different sizes of doll, and I don't generally mind them being all kind of different. But I definitely thought that if I was gonna like get things printed, it would be nice to have the bunny that I know is gonna be a similar size to the later pony. Shout out to my public library, which has a makerspace, which is where I actually got this doll printed in PLA. They also printed the Sea Pony project that I did before. The files for this were so big, I wasn't sure that the makerspace person would agree to do it, but it essentially just took extra time. Also, he asked if he could use my art as an example, and if I could send a photo of it strung up when it was all finished. And I'm not sure I ever got back to him on that, so if you're watching this, then I'm sorry I forgot, but there's almost a 0% chance that he is watching it, so, you know. If I ever go back to the library and he remembers that, that'll be a little awkward. There was one issue that I dealt with right off the bat after I got the pieces back. This is possibly only due to the fact that I printed these in PLA, not in resin, because Moonlight Jewel doesn't seem to have these issues in her video. Still, since these are free files, I feel like I should mention them to people who might print any of the versions in PLA, and I'm going to change them in my final version of the bunny. The newer joints that were added in the second iteration, the torso, elbow, hand, knee, and foot, all narrow down to a very thin line at the bottom in the Blender program. This meant that the PLA printed really too thin at those edges to the point where it broke off. Again, I don't know if this is just because it's PLA that it was too thin, but that required sanding some of the joints down, and some of them were so weak I had to reinforce them with a bit of epoxy. The same thing did happen to the feet of my resin Takara ball jointed doll, which, yes, I now have. It's been so long since I started the bunny project that I actually have the Takara ball jointed doll project. Spoiler alert. If you didn't see my Applejack video, a very kind person sent me the resin prints of my Takara ball jointed doll. As a side note, not all of the sanding was due to the design. The library makes every effort to print every piece without supports. Impossible. So, at the bottom of the head, for example, there's a rough area where there was a lot of overhang and the plastic looks pretty rough. Most of the pieces did pretty well. They seem to be printed without mostly supports, and the feet were printed flat on the printer bed, which helps a lot with keeping them flat on the ground. Printing in PLA versus printing in resin is essentially very different, and they're going to be really different results, but it's nice to know that a lot of these pieces can be printed in PLA, which prevents, you know, as much waste and stuff as resin. And I personally think that PLA can be really helpful for people who are like starting out. It's also a lot more like lightweight. I didn't do as much sanding for this doll as I did for my Sea Pony doll, but if you sand enough and you use like some good filler, you can really remove the layer lines that you get. Although honestly, I didn't really mind the lines because this doll was printed in such a large size, it really didn't matter that much in the end. I think if it was printed in a much smaller size, the lines would be more obvious, but as it is, I'm okay with the texture that's like left after all of the sanding that I did do. Which, again, I didn't go overboard with sanding because I was just like tired of sanding after a while. The other issue that I dealt with was mostly due to my own incompetence. Specifically, the changes that I made to the sculpt. I mentioned that I added bars to the joint holes, and that ended up being an imperfect solution. Because I was so worried that the joint bars would break, I ended up making them thicker and near the edge of the ball port of the joint. But for them to work effectively, they should really be at the middle of the ball so that they can pose properly. I also should have placed the ears and tail slightly more protruding so they would have better posability. The ears still have a decent range of motion, but the tail less so, especially with clothes on. That's not so surprising, but it could be improved in a lot of ways. The third thing is that I should have thought more about the weight of the head, since I made the doll so much bigger. The walls of the head on the original were essentially as thick as they could be without being too delicate and while allowing the eyes in. Dollightful kind of goes over this in her video. Once it's sized up a few times, it's exponentially heavier and carrying a lot more weight. I was trying so hard to preserve Dollightful's original design and other aspects like mimicking the style of ear that I didn't think about that sort of practical aspect that she went over in her video, where she tried to make the walls thin but not too thin. I hope people don't mind that more of this video is focused on the sort of experience of model and design that I had, rather on clothes or painting. Obviously, the painting on this doll is kind of minimal, and I made the majority of the clothing off screen, as you'll see. For me, printing this doll was more about learning how ball joint dolls work, and specifically how other artists have applied them. Of course, I'm still happy with the finished doll, and there's still more to show you in this video. I've actually taken her to a lot of places over the last year that she's been around. She's pretty sturdy and she's lightweight, and I really do like her. She can even balance on her feet if I position her carefully. Her limbs do get turned around kind of easily and have a bit too much flexibility at times, almost like she's double jointed, but she can at least hold a lot of positions. I hope to do a video eventually on the Takara Pony ball jointed doll. Well, multiple videos, but specifically one with details relating to elastic strung dolls and ball joints. When I was trying to learn how to make a ball jointed doll, either 3D modeling or hand sculpting, for beginners, I struggled to find good sources that explained things. Specifically about the joints, most of the videos I could find were about creating like a very specific aesthetic of sculpture, like an anime model, human, usually a woman, and how to sculpt with clay sort of generally in order to make the faces and things. But there was much, much less detail into how the ball joints actually work, which was pretty frustrating as someone who likes anthropomorphic dolls a little bit more than a lot of human dolls, and really just wanted to know how the joints work. Also, if you want to make an animal with unique joints that is not, human, then knowing how the joints work is super necessary, and there just aren't that many publicly available resources with people explaining that sort of thing. There are a couple of super great artists who have posted, like I think of the person who makes the Cabots on Cults 3D, who has posted some resources for people, and they do some anthropomorphic dolls and stuff like that, but seems to be very limited. But I hope to eventually be a resource, especially for people like me who are curious about ball jointed dolls, but don't have the money or aren't interested in buying one just to take it apart and look at the joints, and are more interested in the creation side and making their own thing. All in all, though, I was able to get her to a state where she was strung within a couple months last year. Her body is a light cream on top of white PLA, so not much changes appearance-wise from the print. Her eye whites were printed at the same time, and I, painted them, and I actually used clear resin to fill in the clear parts, although they are kind of full of bubbles. And that was the majority of everything I finished for a long time. A long, long time. Okay, so this is a bit of an odd situation. Last time I recorded a segment for this video. I was just assembling Bunny. And as you can see, she's fully assembled now, and she does have a little outfit. This is not the outfit that I want her to have, though, so I'm not considering this the reveal. And I just wanted to explain a little bit why. You might notice that Bunny is now a little dinged up in some areas. Maybe it has little bumps and scratches. Most of them I can just rub off because this is just acrylic paint. But yes, she is all assembled, and she actually has been for at least 6 months. Actually, last Christmas, I took her to my partner's family's house, and I made her this dress literally, like, while we were there. So that's why it's kind of... I need to fix the seams at the bottom because they were just with glue, and the glue got undone. But yeah, the other pieces, I just made her a little dress so that she wouldn't be completely naked. And since then, I have took Bunny to a few different places. I've, taken her out to the forest. I've taken her to Iowa on a road trip. So she's been coming around with me on adventures in the little outfit that she's in now. But I wanted to round out this video by finishing up a similar plan to the original outfit. One of the reasons I kept delaying this was not having the right material. So I originally wanted her outfit to be like all black and white, but I don't have any black fabric like this. It's more like a ribbon netting, honestly. But I'm gonna use this because I got a bunch of it at a sale type thing. And I have a couple other maroon pieces of fabric that I can also use. I have some black, I have some of this nice off-white ribbon which should match well, and be all the ribbons in the piece. I also have some felt that I'm going to use for the hat. So I think I'm going to make the hat black and then the dress a mix of black and maroon. As you can see, she's currently in red, so it's thematically that's kind of the same. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now, and then we will have her in her full dress. Did I record that last voiceover part 2 months ago? Yes. I got distracted. Not that surprising. I decided to alter the design based on materials I already had for the bunny doll, although there were some features that I wanted to keep. The skirt, for example, I took the tool that I had gotten and hot glued these little glitter stars, which was really my original plan, was to put these stars on something. I've had these little glitter stars for years and I just wanted to use them, so they were part of the original design that I knew I already had at the time. I also wanted to keep the hat similar to the original design, although I wasn't entirely sure how to do it. For my Takara Applejack, I made an okay version of her hat out of felt and glue, but I wanted this one to be sturdier. I ended up actually sewing the hat together. It's honestly still a bit small on her head, and it didn't end up as perfectly round as the drawing, but I think the lace and flowers kind of distract from the wonkiness. While I'm finishing up these little clothing pieces, I wanted to mention that I made some alterations to the 3D model version I'll be uploading to Thingiverse. I basically redid most of the joints so they wouldn't come to really thin points and break, at least the ones that broke for me. I thinned out the inside of the head so that when it's sized up, it's not as floppy, and I adjusted the position of those bars. Obviously, I can't test this version because I don't have a 3D printer, but I tested it in Cura to make sure it will slice all right. I also can't, verify how well it'll do resin printing specifically, but I will say of the small ball-jointed Takara doll that I have, she has very, very thin resin bars holding her hands on, and they haven't snapped or anything, and they don't seem to have any issues, so I think the bars can be made fairly small without any issue. So that's kind of everything that I have for this video. I'll see you again at the reveal. Da da da! Here is the reveal of her little poofy dress and her little black hat, which match my sort of original design idea. I've included in this little presentation at the end her photos of her from last year and earlier this year, from when I originally made the dress around Christmas, and this spring when she went to Iowa with me, and this spring when she saw the flowers with me. So you can kind of see her in all sorts of different habitats. Overall, I just really like the design of this doll. I like the head that Dollightful designed. I'm a big fan of bunny designs where they have pointy faces. And yeah, overall, I'm just really happy with her. I honestly didn't take that many extra photos. I have to make some sort of set in my room so I can take better photos of my dolls, but I was happy with the outdoor shots, so I just didn't worry about getting too many shots of her like new dress. I'm sure you'll see her in future videos. You guys might know that I always post photos of all my dolls together when I make new ones, so you'll see her in the future, I'm sure. It will be completely free because it's not my original design. It's just a remix of an existing design. If you would like to see my original designs, you can see more of them on my Ko-fi page and my Cults 3D. And thank you to my Ko-fi supporters, Luca, Retro Geek Crafts, Serendipity, and Gabby Rose. And yeah, that's all. Thank you. Bye-bye. I'm finally done. Finally done with the bunny doll.